Hey guys, welcome to my channel. So today we're going to get stuck into some more concepts and content around getting faster and building speed on the guitar. We're going to have a look at some of the tools that I use every day in my practice arsenal and that I get my students using that sees them get massive explosions in speed and results. These are tools that I use every single day in my personal practice sessions. And they're the secret weapons that I then pass on to my students so that they can start to improve their speed, improve their efficiency, but most of all, improve their confidence on the guitar and break through speed ceilings and barriers like never before. Now, a quick mention, it's important that if you haven't seen my video on speed building concepts that I wish I knew when I was younger, you really need to check that out because today's video is going to be built off of that video. In that video, I explore some really important concepts with the different tempos and speed zones that you can actually practice in when you are practicing the guitar. They are the floor, the working tempo, and the ceiling. I also explore a concept called guitar CPU, which is your brain's ability to process the information. And when you're practicing, understanding the different sensations of how it actually feels to be in each tempo zone and what happens to your brain in each tempo zone and why most people don't actually build their speed or get any faster on the guitar. So it's really important that you understand these concepts. And if you haven't seen that video yet, make sure that you go and watch it straight after this one so that you get a more thorough understanding of exactly what I'm going to be showing you today. I'll leave a link to it. And also I have a free 7-day metal guitar bootcamp that you can join to upgrade your guitar skills in a more immersive experience with me, where I go into a lot more depth on these speed building concepts, but relate it more to metal technique. So if you want to join that experience and have an immersive bootcamp with me over the course of 7 days where it gets emailed to you, make sure you sign up to my bootcamp and I'll see you in there. Now, with that out of the way, let's get stuck into today's stuff. Okay, so the number one practice tool that I use and that I teach my students is a piece of software called Guitar Pro. You might have heard of it already. You may be using it right now. If you are, absolutely fantastic. If you aren't, then I highly recommend you check it out. It's a piece of software that I've been using since my teens. I got into Guitar Pro when Guitar Pro 3 was first released, and we're now up to Guitar Pro 8. I used it to learn songs and to write music for my bands. And I still have memory of an experience of traveling and being in a hostel in Miami in Florida in America, where I was actually writing a piece of music for one of my bands for an upcoming release. I absolutely love this software, and I think it is one of the best tools that we can be using as a modern guitarist. And it's the single most powerful and transformative piece of practice kit that we can embed into our practice routines. And when I introduce it to my students, when they're ready for it, I see a massive explosion in their results, in their confidence, and in their speed. Now, please keep in mind, I'm not endorsed by Guitar Pro. This video is not created for that purpose of simply selling Guitar Pro software or being sponsored by them. Now, in full transparency, I do have an affiliate link for Guitar Pro, and yes, I earn a commission from that if people purchase through it. And if you do feel like you want to do that, I will place a link for it and you can go and check it out. But that's not really the purpose of today's video. The purpose of today's video is around education and embedding this piece of software into your practice routine so that you can get massive results with it too and break your speed barriers. I'm doing this video because I see it get such huge results when I introduce it to my students. No matter what technique or what concept we're working on, when they start to incorporate this in their practice routine, they have explosions in their speed. But it's really important that some other things are in place as well with how they are practicing, which I explore in some of my other videos, which you can check out in my teaching playlist. Now, there are a number of tab websites out there today, like Ultimate Guitar and Songstar, but did you know that they're actually using Guitar Pro software in the background and rendering it onto a website and then charging way more than what Guitar Pro actually costs for a monthly subscription fee for you to use their services? And given that I'm such a strong advocate and user of Guitar Pro from way back in the Guitar Pro 3 days, I always encourage people to go to the source, which is Guitar Pro itself, and then having it on their computers and installing it so that they can use it regardless of whether they have access to the internet or not. Because if you're traveling and say you're mid-flight and you don't have access to Wi-Fi, you can still use Guitar Pro. I've been stuck in airports on layovers where I've used Guitar Pro to practice and to write when I didn't have access to either Wi-Fi or my guitars. And I actually wrote music on a 7-hour layover when I was stuck in Chile in Santiago airport waiting for a transfer back to Australia. So So why have I found Guitar Pro so effective? The first thing is to understand my speed building concepts. In the video I made on speed building concepts I wish I knew when I was younger, I talk about the 3 different areas of speed in which you can practice and what each of those speed areas feels like for your brain when you're practicing and your guitar CPU. So this is really important to understand, and I'm going to load up the diagram here again and quickly run through the 3 different speed zones that we can practice guitar in. So number 1 is the floor. The floor is where we're just noodling. It is where we're comfortable. It is where we're not actually growing and we're playing the same licks that we've been comfortable with for decades sometimes, that don't actually really push us any further forward as a guitarist. It's also where we're distracted in our practice session. And this is a common thing because some people might sit down to practice and they're technically putting in the time, but they're not practicing in the correct tempo zones to actually get results. They're playing in their floor. Nothing really happens down in your floor. Now, the next zone is your working speed. Your working speed is where you actually activate your subconscious. Your guitar CPU is starting to spin up and you feel a sensation of pressure with whatever you're playing. You have to focus. You can't have distractions. If you're actually going to pull off whatever lick or scale or speed or technique that you're playing in your working tempo, then you need full focus to be able to pull it off, and you can only just pull it off. This is what practice actually is, and correct practice is spent in this zone. And that's where we actually grow and get results on the guitar. Now, the final speed area is the ceiling speed. Your ceiling is where you're starting to spin out of control. You're going a little too fast. We've got stress being introduced to your system. Sometimes that's really, really powerful and really important to break you out of a rut or out of a plateau. And we need a shock occasionally, but you can't be spending all of your time here. If you do, you're just going to introduce incorrect form, incorrect technique, and play pretty sloppily. You might be able to play fast, but it's not going to be clean. It's not going to be efficient in terms of its technique and its mechanics either. So how does Guitar Pro fit into this? We've got our 3 speed areas in which we can practice in. And if we understand that, we can then use a tool like Guitar Pro to really hook into our working tempo and understand exactly where our working tempos are. Because Guitar Pro gives us a really easy to use tool and can add an element of structure to our practice sessions that we don't get without it. We can find these tempo zones on whatever we're practicing, whatever exercises we're going through, whatever scales. We can actually simulate a metronome with it and play to a backing track at the same time. And then we can fluctuate our BPM or our tempo, and we can also play things in terms of percentages. So I love Guitar Pro and I love introducing it to my students for this reason. It adds an added layer of structure and accountability to your practice so that you can find your working tempo and you can practice correctly in the right zone and not waste your time in your floor or in your ceiling. So it does mimic a metronome and we can use it in that way, but we can also use it in the way to mimic backing tracks by playing along with the files and playing along with the songs in Guitar Pro. I find this is way less boring than playing along with a metronome, and it also gives me an added layer of accountability and allows me to structure my practice sessions way better than just setting a click and kind of getting bored with it. Or having to jump onto YouTube and wind tracks backward, find the right point in the song, and then jump on my guitar, stop the YouTube track, jump back to it. Guitar Pro just allows me to hit spacebar, highlight the part that I want to work on, and then it will play and repeat if I've done it correctly. And I love it for those reasons. It makes my practice sessions really, really efficient and means that I'm getting the best return on the investment of my time and my energy into my guitar practice. So Guitar Pro allows me to work in terms of BPM. I can understand where my actual working tempos are really scientifically. I can measure them, and if I can measure them, I can improve them because I understand exactly where I'm at with different techniques, with different subdivisions, and with different tempos. And as I said, it's way more entertaining than just using a simple click. But the other thing I love about Guitar Pro is that it allows me to work in percentages. So if I want to measure myself up against a great player and play one of my favorite solos or songs, I can actually slow it right down as a percentage, just like I can in YouTube. But doing it this way, I really get the best of both worlds. And I can slowly rack up my percentages over time, or I can slowly rack up my BPMs over time. And I love it for this reason. It gives me so much more. I also personally find it really motivating to understand where I'm at in terms of a percentage up against a great player. How quick am I? How much work do I have to do? Do I need to put in another 6 months in terms of my technique to really unlock the tempos that I'm looking for? And how close am I to closing the gap on that player? So the next reason I really love Guitar Pro is so that I can actually use it to compose and create. I've written whole albums in Guitar Pro, and every time I do a writing cycle, I'll tend to change whatever tool I'm using. Sometimes I'll just go straight into my DAW. Sometimes I'll plan everything out on Guitar Pro. I've even done it recording into an old iPhone and doing it that way. It just gives me another tool in which I can use to create and then catalog and store whatever I'm working on until I have enough material to turn into an EP or an album. Now, from an educational perspective, I can use that to create exercises for my students and exercises for myself. And my students can even do that too once they learn to use Guitar Pro as a compositional tool. But obviously that's a little bit more advanced. You just want to learn the basics and the fundamentals of using Guitar Pro first. But this also allows a really scientific approach for my students. I can send them through an exercise that they're working on that's going to grow them on the guitar, and then I can understand where their working tempos actually are. I can measure them, I can monitor them, and if I can monitor and measure, I can improve. So sometimes I'll send my students tailored Guitar Pro files with their personal exercises in them, and I'll ask them to report back to me in their next lesson what tempos they actually got to. And then we can record them and we can start to see the improvements in their speed over time. And personally, I find this really motivating. Guitar is one of these things, it's a bit of a head game and it can really mess with you at times in your psychology, and you have to be really strong because there's a lot of emotion that goes into playing music. And a lot of the time we're comparing up against some absolute freak shows online. So we've got to ignore all that stuff and just look at where we're at and ask the simple question, are we improving? Guitar Pro allows us to measure that and monitor that way more effectively and way more easier than we can without it. So if you're like me and you're a metal guitarist, and maybe we want to choose a technique to work on. We want to work on our down picking, our galloping, our alternate picking, our legato, our sweep picking, our tapping, for example. Or maybe we want to work on a musical concept. We want to work on our scales. We want to work on our groupings. We want to work on our arpeggios. Maybe it's even our chords and our voicings. We can create exercises around these techniques or musical concepts, and then we can apply either a metronome effect using BPM or a percentage, find our working tempo, and then start to push our working tempo up over time. And if we do that, as I explained in my other video around speed building concepts I wish I knew when I was younger, when we push our working tempo up, we bring our floor up with us, and we also push our ceiling up over time. And this is how we get faster using Guitar Pro. The other thing I really like about using Guitar Pro with the personality type that I am, is that it allows me to get a really healthy structure into my practice sessions. And what I mean by that is I can literally plan my practice sessions out. If I've only got 15 minutes or 30 minutes in between a class, or I've just got a hectic day where I can't get much done, I can slot into my practice session file, work through my exercises, use a timer, and really get the most out of each individual exercise and that entire practice session. So I'm not wasting any of my time. It allows me to basically plan out my practice sessions as if I was in the gym and I had a training program where I'm doing sets and reps. I love being able to walk away from my practice sessions knowing that I got the most out of it, knowing that I absolutely cooked myself and gave my all, just like a great workout in the gym. And I can use Guitar Pro to do this every single practice session. Now, the final boss mode of why Guitar Pro is such a valuable tool to improve our speed is if you write music. So once you learn to use it as a compositional tool, you can take your ideas and whatever cool riffs that you can create, you can write them out in Guitar Pro and then you can play them back. You can even write really complex guitar parts, put them into Guitar Pro, and then speed train yourself to where you want those guitar parts to get to. And I absolutely love this feature of Guitar Pro. This is what a lot of the modern guitarists do these days. Whether it's guys like Tim Henson, Jason Richardson, they can punch their parts into Guitar Pro, and then they can start to work on their technique and work on their speed and build it up over time. But they won't often show you this part of the process, but it's definitely part of the modern musician's arsenal and practice routine. And let's say you're a touring musician or you've been working on a multitude of projects, and then you have to go out on tour or go out and play a show for a project that you haven't actually looked at in a while. You can recall your old Guitar Pro files that you used and that you composed and that you wrote, and then you can relearn your part really quickly and really easily, and not just by ear. Then once you do that, you're ready to get back out, hit the road, play a couple of shows with that new material, and go through whatever touring or live gigging cycle that you're on currently. So there you go, guys. Now, if you want to grab a copy of Guitar Pro and use my affiliate link, you'll see it in the comments below. And if you also want to sign up to my 7-day free metal guitar bootcamp, you'll also see that in the comments below. But now that you've watched this video, I want you to go back and study the video I made on speed building concepts I wish I knew when I was younger, so you can really, really get the most out of your practice sessions and improve your speed today.